Yeah.
Can we just quickly look at your publishing journey? Whenever we speak to authors, every author has their own story as to how they came to be published. What's your story? You talked about you received the phone call and you're sort of put on the hook for a little while. And what was the actual process? I'm always intrigued. For example, here in Australia, the publishing industry is a lot smaller, and you can directly approach larger publishing houses, and if you're lucky enough, you can get picked up even without an agent. But my understanding is in the US, there's a much stronger leaning towards the requirement to find an agent first before getting picked up by a publisher. What was your experience, and how did you land a publisher?
No, I completely agree. In New York, unless you have an agent, they're not even going to read your email,
Wow.
especially with the big time publishing houses. So, what I did was I made sure first and foremost that my story was as complete and polished that I can make it using my abilities. Once I was satisfied with the end product, honestly, I went on the Google and I researched as much information as I could, speculative fiction presses, sci-fi presses, just trying to use as many keywords in my Google search. Um, and again, like you kind of have to be bold, like you can't be afraid, like you have to, even if you get a rejection, like you still have to put yourself out there. And even if you feel like, oh, what's the point of reaching out to this person? They're not going to accept it. You still have to do it anyway, because what's the worst that's going to happen?
Mm.
But even before that, I want to say too, working on your emails and your pitches is very, very important. I'm sure you guys know the Curie letters or emails nowadays. You definitely have to make sure like your formatting's right, you're saying the right things or typing the right things, and once you have like a solid draft of your pitch that you want to email publishers or agents, then you go forth with that. But yeah, I would say my process was just doing a lot of research and emailing a lot of publishers and the genre I was going for.
So you didn't go through an agent yourself?
I mean, I reached out to agents. I definitely reached out to agents, but a lot of them either told me that they got a lot on their plate, or we like your story, but unfortunately, it doesn't fit the what we're looking for right now, which is basically enough. So
Or,
they're just
or they
trying to,
or
yeah,
they don't reply at all. I've got a very
or they don't
impressive
reply,
yeah, I've got a
or they don't
very
reply.
I've got a very impressive rejections list, so I'm hearing your pain, so I know exactly what it's like. Can we
Yeah,
jump into a bit more of a deep dive relating to the underlying themes of your writing? And I saw there was a quote, I think it was on your website, where you're quoted as saying your inspiration comes from various societal abnormalities, the beauty and cultural differences, and your own life experiences. So, just in terms of your own creative process, writing from idea to a completed story outline, how do you evolve that initial idea and flesh it out to become a full novel length story?
yeah. So pretty much my process of going about that is um, I focus on a singular concept or idea for an overall story. And I literally like take a bunch of notebooks, and each notebook represents a chapter. So at that point, I'm not really worried about like grammar or like how it may sound. It's just kind of I'm regurgitating like my creative inspirations onto paper. Um, then after that, I sift through like the words essentially and my ideas, and I structure it to more of a concrete theme. Um, but yeah, like pretty much all of my ideas, whether it's like towards writing a book or towards a short story or an essay on various topics, I try to stretch one singular idea in different directions. And what I mean by that is, and it kind of goes back to like what you mentioned about what I get my inspiration from. Like, I'm a very like reflective thinker, so I tend to see the different lenses of life, like different perceptions of life, whether through art, movies, music, other people's stories, my personal experiences, and I mimic that when it comes to expanding on ideas. So if we could like visualize like uh, what's a good analogy? Like Play-Doh. Okay, so like you have like this raw form of Play-Doh, but at the same time, you kind of have to stretch it and play with it until you get your masterpiece. You have
Hmm.
to stretch it in different directions that may seem very abstract at first, but by the time you're done doing that, and then you add the concrete logic of okay, now let's actually structure this into a story. You find yourself with something where you're like, oh wow, this is like way different than the initial product. So uh, I don't know if that answered your question. I'm not sure if that was too like out there, but that's pretty much my process with that.
I really like your analogy of the Play-Doh and just working it and letting it evolve. Uh, and I'm always a key advocate that you can think about writing as much as you like, but until you actually start physically typing on the keyboard, that's when the creative, for me anyway, that's when the creative juices really start to flow. And as you say, start with something rough. Like your Play-Doh, your blob of Play-Doh, and then knead it and work it until it becomes that masterpiece. So I really like that analogy. That was really well articulated.
Thank you. And just to add to that too, I agree. Like once you start like the process of like typing out your story and bringing it closer to that final product, I mean, I don't know if you guys can relate, but sometimes the story writes itself. Like it gets to a point where it becomes almost like an out of body experience. Like you're behind the keyboard and like you're adding things and you're having fun but it gets to a point where it's almost like the story is just kind of going on its own. Like the momentum from your creativity and your passions are just like the characters become more alive, the plots become more vivid, and it gets to a point where like you're in the story and you're going along for the ride, and that's when it
You,
becomes special. That's when the magic happens.
Mm.
you're sounding very much like a pantser.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely you know everybody has their own process, but at the end of the day, you want to get to that magic point where like you become one with
Yeah.
the creative process.
I've after finishing my series, I'm now looking for what to write next. And I've, for the last sort of 6 months or more, I was saying that I was going to work on this one particular book, but it would need some plotting and the like. And I was like, oh, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to plot this one. I'm going to plot it. I'm going to get some software. I'm going to do all of this plotting sh stuff and get it all right before I start writing. And after about month and a half to 2 months of actually doing nothing. Um, the messages that I went, you probably need to write something else. And then I just started
And
writing another one that I'd thought of and just started writing it. And it's definitely pantser stuff. And just like, and you're off. And you go, yeah, that's my sort of style of writing. This whole sort of plotting thing. Plotting can be done afterwards in the editing process and making it all sort of fit properly. But the actual writing, I find I need to be doing it as this creative flow rather than actually plotting it all out.
no, I completely agree. And you definitely want to enjoy like the fun that comes
Mm.
with just, being creative and just, going along for the ride with these characters and these narratives. Because the hard work will come. But at the same time, there is also fun in that. I mean,
Mm.
it might seem tedious when you're looking at it from like, oh man, I have this ahead of me, and gonna have to really use Grammarly and really work on but
You
there
should
there
try Pro
is.
Writing Aid. I find it much better than Grammarly.
I've heard of Pro Writing Aid, and yeah, it's very sophisticated from what I heard.
Yeah.
I prefer Grammarly because I feel like it interfaces really good, like on mobile apps too.
Yeah.
because there are times where like I'm on the train going to work and I could just whip out my phone and maybe work on a few things here and there. But pro writing a definitely is very sophisticated and very
Yeah.
helpful. But you definitely have to find the joy in all process of writing, even the technical aspects when you're structuring your story.
Yeah.
That has its fun aspects too, because it requires you to bring out this level of focus. And when you're bringing out that level of focus, you're really able to appreciate your story from more of a refined eye. I feel like the beginning process of writing a book is like a kid in a like with a bucket of paint, and they're just throwing the paint against the walls, and it's pure. They don't know any better. They're just expressing themselves. But when you get to the cleanup, essentially, um, that has its own like beauty to it too, because you're able to uh, um, shape everything to a more like what's the word? Yeah, you're
Structured.
just able to. Yeah, exactly. You're just able to shape everything to more of an like, okay, uh, this is what it was supposed to be, and it just looks perfect in my eyes. So I think every process has its fun to it.
I really love the way you've captured that. In essence, all writers should remember that we are writing for ourselves initially, and you've used the word, finding the magic in your writing, and enjoying the whole process. And we can all become guilty of being too focused on the business end and what's this end product going to look like, and publishing and all the other peripheral things that go with publishing a book. But in essence, I just love the way you brought it right back to the grassroots, that real primal reason why we write. There's something inside us. I think anyone that gets to the point of completing a novel, number one, that's a major achievement, because there's a lot of people that say they would love to write, but they never do. They talk a lot about writing and they post stuff on social media about writing, but they never actually write. So for the few of us who actually get a completed manuscript, give yourself a pat on the back, because it is a real achievement. But again, we're doing it for our own reasons. Sometimes, but yeah, I think we have to find, if you can be in that utopia where, particularly Mike, with what you're writing kind of futuristic sort of stuff where you can immerse yourself in this new story and you're having fun with the creative process. And that's what writing should be about. It's about, number one, I'm doing it for me, and I'm doing it to enjoy the whole process of creating something, immersing myself in another world, to have a voice about certain issues. We just got to keep reminding ourselves of that, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and especially with the Gift from Aelius, a lot of the motivation comes from, especially with the main character A191. A lot of it comes from how I am. And in the book A191, he feels like an outcast. He feels too indifferent compared to uh, his culture or his kind, and that's how I felt growing up. Like it was very hard for me to make friends. I was very socially awkward. And I feel like just subconsciously, even though like we mature as adults, there are certain things that really never truly go away. But when you're able to use these things for something productive and something uh, artistic, like writing a book, you're able to create something that makes sense to you, but also like makes sense to a lot of other people. Again, this is a sci-fi book, and it was fun, being in that dystopian, like futuristic world. But at the same time, it's like you said, when you're able to really resonate with your work and you're able to connect with it on a personal level, it just makes it much more worthwhile when it's finally out there.
Yeah, yeah. Well said.
Very
Can
cathartic.
can we talk a little bit more?
Yeah.
We started touching on it earlier, but in terms of the underlying themes of what your observations of the world are, would it be fair to say that you are observing what's happening in today's world, and you're starting to address some of those key issues, and pretty much you're mapping out one path that we could follow as humanity, and you're effectively saying, hey, listen, we need to stop. We need to listen. We could go down a number of different paths, and your story is an example of one path that humanity might take in terms of the future. So, are you finding that you're observing today's world? You're almost predicting what the future world might look like, and you're portraying that in your writing. And the second part to the question is, what are some of the key themes that you are observing in the world that inspire you to write about those, in terms almost like a warning to humanity that this is where we are going? We could either go down a positive path or a negative path. Here are my observations. I'm writing about the future. So what are some of those key observations that you are relying upon?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, yeah, a lot of the story is coming from what I observe in the world, whether it's what you hear on the news, what you hear from other people. Literally, all you got to do is turn on your TV and see all the, the strife that happens, politically with the wars going on in particular countries. Um, and I think, like, uh, how we interact with the world and what we get from it affects our writing. And it just so happened that a lot of what's going on in the world um, really maps out beautifully to this story. Even though it might not be to the exact degree, it's in a fiction format. But yeah, I would definitely say that a lot of what I've been seeing, what certain groups of people are going through, people who I grew up, things that I've been through personally, maybe on a lesser scale, but I would say just the culmination of all that, in a way, motivated me to push this story to where it eventually goes to, towards the middle and the end of the story. And I'm sorry, your second question.
What are some of the key themes that you've observed in the world that you felt you wanted to address through your writing, or some examples?
I would say, you know, just how people treat each other in povertized countries. Just the unfair rules that go on in certain countries. I don't want to just pinpoint maybe one particular political issue that's going on, but uh, I would say just overall, like, again, all you have to do is just, turn on the TV or step outside, uh, especially in the US, with the election going on, there's definitely a lot to hear and talk about. So,
I think there's a lot
and
of political stuff going on right at this moment in time. I
yeah,
literally read an article this morning of the 15 things that Trump did it last week, and you just go,
yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think just, we're at a point in time as a species, just as people that, we just have to be friendlier with each other and try to understand each other more. No matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican or who you vote for, at the end of the day, we just have to work on treating each other better and um, um, and a lot of the story, like you said, Jack, it reflects what can happen if we continue to go down this path of being greedy for power, money, political stances. Okay, it may not be exactly like the book, but in a way, it could be similar to that. And I just think that it wouldn't be fair for me to just point out like one or two particular key political elements. I think it's just overall, like no matter where you're from, I think everybody kind of sees like, man, we have to really start, maturing in certain things because, we may very well end up being in a, post World War III setting, and our grandkids are gonna, or our great grandkids may say, man, what were they thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't they do this better? Why couldn't they, maybe use AI better? It's
Mm.
like we mentioned earlier, AI is going to continue to evolve. And usually that type of stuff evolves quicker in the military world. Like, not a lot of people know this, but most of our products that we have today on retail, it's you really through military first.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I would say that gives more of a reason, for us to just philosophically and spiritually kind of just be at a different place with one another. So we don't end up in, more wars and, as AI continues to grow, so can uh, the potential for more cataclysmic events. as well. So
I
hopefully
think
that doesn't happen.
there was a cartoon, a very old cartoon that I saw recently that was several people sitting at tables in a restaurant, and you had health, and they all had little labels on them, and there was health, there was education, there was environment, and there was one with a table with war. And that was like heaped with food and loads and like three waiters around it supplying, whereas the other ones were being ignored and had very little to eat. And yes, we get a lot of interventions and a lot of advancement in science and the like come from the military, but that's because they have so much money and they're given so much money to do all of this stuff. If you gave that sort of money or a fraction of that to research, for environmental research or for health research or stuff like that, that wasn't from a monetaristic or capitalistic sort of side of things, is no, this is going to be free. Um, you'd get a lot more results from that than and then you'd be able to say, well, actually, a lot of these a lot of these interventions come from health research or whatever. I think it's because the military gets so much money.
And you know what that shows? And again, like, I've worked with guys in the military, great guys, and for having obviously, like, we need to be able to protect ourselves. But if you think about it, the fact that most of our tax-paying dollars goes to the military kind of shows where our mindset is at. It really shows that we don't trust each other at all. Like, if we're just being honest, like, it obviously it is important to have, and we need to have certain systems in place, because realistically speaking, like, you know we don't know when world peace is going to happen. We're not perfect, so there is
Yeah.
always going to be that element. But
I think
yeah,
there is a little overkill because there was a graphic I saw that had the world's aircraft carriers, and the second placed country was China with three, and I think America had 32.
I mean, that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, but and a lot of what shows in this book is because as you go through the book, there is a lot of military aspects of the book and a lot of mentions of war between mankind and codex units, and kind of what happens as you read the book. Um, so I purposely put that in there because you know war and the consequences of war isn't just in a fiction book. Like, it's very real,
Mm.
and you know we need to be very careful of how we continue to go down that path of you know how we react to things, based off of political motives and all sorts of things. So we don't want our world to end up like that, the middle of my book. We don't want that at all. Yeah.
And what you're talking about, Mike, really underpins the power of fiction about telling the truth about the world through fiction. And as you said, a lot of authors use fiction to find their voice, to talk about very real and important issues about the world and where we're heading as a species, but all through fictional stories. And some people might say, I've heard some people say, I don't read fiction. I only read non-fiction. Fiction is just all made up stuff. But really, any fictional story that's worth its salt is based on some real important issue, and the fictional characters are conveying very important messages. So I think the power of story is so important, whether it's non-fiction or fiction. We can still use that as a tool to convey, and it's interesting. Like Harry, you talked about an old cartoon. Some of the old stories and old classics that were written back in the 50s and 60s, and predictions about the world, and you look and read those now, I think, wow, they were pretty spot on, and we should have taken note back then. And some of these authors can be very influential in expressing important views. So I don't think I think that the key takeaway is that we shouldn't underestimate the power of storytelling and how that reflects the real world.
I completely agree. And a lot of what we see in fiction, you know, for somebody to come up with a fiction story, the ideas have to be drawn from something in their life. So, like, no matter what we conjure with our imagination, no matter how fantastical it may be, there has to be core elements of reality, because at the end of the day, what the power of the imagination is rooted in the real world. We just kind of stretch it and color it in to, fit certain themes and, genres. But it is very important to recognize that. I completely agree.
And just really quickly before we wrap up, you have a blog on your website where you write and have posted various articles on a number of topics. Can you tell us a little bit more about your blog and how the idea came from, and how do you choose topics to write about?
Sure. So I use a platform called clippings.me, and anybody who would want to read my work, you would just type in Michael Cologne portfolio or Michael Cologne author, and it's going to be like the first or second thing you see in the search result. Um, yeah, I would say a lot of what's on my portfolio is it's creative, but it's me showing like who I am, like my personality, how I think. Um, it has everything from basketball stuff to nature. I like going hiking, so there's a lot of nature articles, poetry, sports stuff. There's a few short stories in there, but yeah, I would say anybody who would want to visit my portfolio is someone who would want to learn more about the author, and more about me, essentially, through different avenues of writing topics. So there's
Yeah.
everything on there for the casual person who just likes to read poetry sometimes, to people who like long form philosophical essays. Um, yeah, there's a little bit of everything on there.
And that's really interesting. I think as authors, we can become too focused on marketing our products, our books, and everything else that we're doing. But a lot of readers, they want to know about the person, who is the person behind the story, and marketing yourself as a person is a really important thing to do. So, for authors who are looking at different ways to market themselves, would you recommend blog writing? I mean, if you were to look at it, you know, um, in terms of efficiency, bang for your buck in terms of how much effort goes into writing articles, and then whether you're able to drive traffic and get people to read those, and how that helps build your author portfolio. It's a lot of work, but are you starting to see the benefits from writing a blog, or versus you're doing it because you want to express yourself and write interesting stories? But from a very pragmatic point of view, do you see benefit in terms of author marketing as well when you look at the amount of time that goes into that? Just for in terms of advice for someone who is looking at maybe creating. I mean, I'm certainly interested in that idea as well, but I've often thought, oh, it seems like a lot of work. Is it really going to pay off in terms of, am I going to get the benefit of all the work that I'm putting in?
Yeah, no, it's definitely beneficial. For me personally, the way I go about marketing the Gift from Aelius, I don't really use my portfolio to market it. I use it for one of the reasons that you mentioned, which is to give the readers an idea of like who I am, um, showing off like my different avenues of creative expression. But at the same time, like maybe if you have more of a website, like an author website, would be more beneficial for marketing a book. What I have is more of a portfolio slash blog. I do plan on eventually creating more of a professional author website um, that would also promote the book. But um, yeah, I would say it's definitely um, could be helpful, because at the end of the day, like, you're putting yourself out there. So the more people hear about your name in different avenues, the more curiosity people will have. Like, oh, I didn't know that. He likes to write about that stuff, or oh, like I'm into that stuff as well. That's pretty cool. So you're actually gaining more of a broader audience, because, for example, like, my book is sci-fi, so the traditional sci-fi readers, will be gravitated towards that. But, you know, not everybody just likes one thing. That sci-fi reader might be into, nature, and they see a few stuff on my website or portfolio that has to do with that. So that might uh, that'll develop more of a connection.
Action.
And at the end of the day, when the reader has more of a connection to an author, they appreciate what they put out more. Um, but yeah, in terms of marketing, definitely having a blog, whether it's a blog, website, or portfolio, it doesn't hurt. Um, but I feel like if you really want
Depends
to,
what you
like,
say.
yeah, that's true. It does depend on what you say, but you can't make everyone happy. You know, at the end of the day, like, it's good to, like, even when you're writing a book or after you're writing a book, you want to keep the pencil sharp. You know, you don't want to just stop writing. You know,
So
the brain's a
are you
muscle.
writing your second book?
Yes. So I actually just started the sequel to the Gift from Aelius. So
Right.
I'm excited about that. It's in its beginning stages, and I'm also working on another fiction book that's not sci-fi, and I'm very excited about that. Um, and I'm just glad to be on this journey. And even though I'm working on these books, I do plan on reaching other genres and still adding to my brand overall.
So it sounds like you're throwing paint on two walls.
Many walls, yes. But it's so much fun. It's so much fun. Like, I feel like people, not everyone, but like a lot of people overthink this. It's like, just kind of just go out there and express yourself. Like, and, for me, like, I taught myself, like, I didn't go to school for this. Nobody taught me this. Like, I literally, again, the power of the internet's amazing. You just go on Google and
Google it.
you could really learn a lot. But also you have to, like, really put in the time and the effort to really look at things serious, and you know um, just do your research and apply the research and practice. And I definitely learned a lot just by self-teaching myself. And that's just the route that I took personally. But for marketing a book, one thing that I found helpful is campaign ads. So Google has a thing called Google Ads,
Mm.
and you make these campaigns. And my last campaign ad had 4,000 clicks and 32,000 impressions. Now, my next royalty check, that may lead to something, but at the end of the day, you're teaching yourself skills, just overall. Like,
Mm.
I never thought about making ads and stuff like that, but it's a skill that I learned. So,
Mm.
uh, yeah, just there's a lot to learn. There's definitely a lot to learn in the writing world.
Well, that's probably a good place to wrap things up. We've had an excellent conversation. You've articulated yourself beautifully. So, Mike, whatever fears you have around public speaking, um, they're not
They're not
founded, because
grounded.
you speak very professionally. You articulate yourself so well. I wish I could articulate myself as well as you do. So,
I'm
congratulations.
flattered.
No, you come across
Thank
very
you.
professionally, so well done, and everything you've said, you've outlined and articulated beautifully. Congratulations on the release of your book. Best of luck with all your future endeavors, and we may get you back on for another chat down the track.
Thank you so much, Jack and Harry. I had so much fun, and I definitely would like to come back on. And I feel like I could just talk to you guys, just um, regardless of the second book comes out. I feel like we just have so much to talk about, and I really enjoy this. And to everybody out there in Australia, I definitely would appreciate just the support on my author journey, and I would like to visit out there one day. It's on my bucket list. So I definitely appreciate this. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
you've got a
thanks very much for coming along. I need to go and get myself a coffee.
Coffee. Yeah,
coffee.
yeah.
Well, Michael, I've been to New York once. I've been to the States three times. I've always said New York is the city that I'd love to come back to. So I'll give you a call, and maybe we can hook up for a coffee next time I'm back in New York. And come to Down Under. You'll love it.
Definitely. It sounds great.
Okay, look, we will call it a day. Thanks again, and all the best, Mike.
Bye now.
Thank you. Take care.